Hello my loyal companions, welcome back to the channel. In today's video I wanted to go over the upcoming changes that are going to be happening to the weapons and rogues in the next big patch and talk to you a little bit about how the meta may shift from what we currently have to what we may be seeing in the future. If you do go on to enjoy the video or learn something new, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. But for now, let's get into it. Let's start by talking about where the meta is currently. I'm going to start with the best rogues that are currently within the game. Going into the core rogues that you'll see pretty much every single game, we're going to start with Dahlia and Trench, which is the power combo at the moment, with the double gadget up passive, giving them twice the amount of utility they would normally have, with the MXRs that they both have, which is the strongest weapon in the game, with Dahlia's revive with Lifeline to accompany that, and with Trench's barbed wire. They're really strong at the moment. They're absolutely powering through the lobbies and they're doing really well. If you're not practicing these in a team that you'll win or just in your solo play, you should pick them up. They're really good currently. You then have Vi and DMR, who are added somewhere within that mix in the team comps. Normally Vi for defense and DMR for offense because they're so strong. Vi obviously has amazing close quarter combat zone control and DMR obviously has great close quarter combat breach. They're both really in a good place right now and they're both core depending on the side of the map you're on. And then what tends to happen is if you're on attack, you have this Dahlia Trench DMR and you'll wait for some other flex pick that we'll go on to talk about. Or if you're on defense, you have Dahlia Trench Vi and some flex pick. Those flex picks vary, but you have rogues such as Lancer for that flank potential. You have things like Phantom. If you have a really good Phantom on your team who hits those shots consistently, it's a great one-shot potential, really great pick potential, and really great momentum for your team. You then have things like Ronin, who are just good all round for any sort of purpose or any sort of situation the team wants to go for, any different plays they want to make. You have Saint, who's obviously great for those longer range maps where there are some extended gunfights and you can get some revives off. That's really good for Saint. And then you have Talon, who is not used as much currently, but is still in an okay place. That reveal is really useful. The C4 has been tanked a bit since its nerf, but flashbangs are really good, and we'll go on to that when we talk about the gadgets. And then his DMR is still pretty good at the moment, offering some really good tip potential, particularly for those of you who are really accurate. So Talon is still in an okay place at the moment, although is not seen as much as he used to be. But a lot of what makes those rogues so good are the weapons and gadgets and utility they have available to them beyond just their core kit. And we'll talk a little bit about those weapons now. So as you guys know, the DMR meta is really heavy at the moment. The game in terms of weapons is DMR focused. All the DMRs are good in their own right or in their own way and are actually dominating lobbies quite a lot. The MXR particularly is the one that is the problem. It has such a good fire rate, it has such good range, it has such good hip fire. There's nothing wrong with this gun and it's able to beat out some SMGs, able to beat out ARs, and able to beat out the other DMRs really quite easily. And if you're able to hit those shots, and particularly headshots, you're melting through people with this weapon. And this is what I think a lot of the patch is going to try and address. In that same boat, you have the KA-30, which is in a good place, the Mamba, which is in a good place, although I do not see it used much in average play. It is used at the high level for really great pick and long-range fight potential. I think that's really just where it is. I don't think a lot of people like the 3-on burst mechanic of it. So it may seem like a problem for a lot of people, but actually it's in a really good spot at the moment meta-wise for the high-level plays. You then have the D3DI, which is Talon's DMR, and this, if you're able to hit the double headshot, is really, really good. You have the Devotion, which is not as good for the DMRs, but you can actually pop out of cover with it and take a quick shot really quickly, and that is its general play style at the moment. You have the Sniper, which obviously, if you're an amazing Phantom, makes this weapon really meta. If you're not that good at Phantom, you're not hitting every single headshot, then it's not as good. The Executioner pistol is another weapon that is really strong at the moment. It is dominating pistol rounds. It is so good even outside of pistol rounds and can compete with some ARs, some SMGs, and is just really strong and probably needs a little bit of a tune down. And then you have also the 24S, which is Lancer's SMG, which I just put in here because of how strong it is in all the different circumstances. Lancers are really good at getting up in your face for that short range, and that's why this weapon is so good, but it also can compete at mid and long ranges as well, which it really shouldn't. And then you have these rogues utility, which are amazing, and here are some of the best utility that are currently within the meta. Smoke grenades for blocking off lines of sight, gas grenades, which people are sleeping on far too much. They are so strong. If you are able to use them properly, and a high level play they are, they're really, really strong. You should try and use these a bit more. You should be adding them to your pool, either by using Vi or Trench, and just going through and using them a bit more effectively because they are really good. Don't sleep on them. You then have your standard grenade, which is the best lethal because you have so much control over the cook time and positioning, whereas a Semtex, you kind of have to get the stick at this point to make it really worth it. The blast radius isn't very good, and tenacity counters it too hard. You then have the APS, active protection systems, which are amazing. These are really great for blocking off different pieces of utility coming at you and are just a must if you're picking up Trench. You then have Incendiary, which since its buff is really strong as it can burn through walls a lot of the time and do pretty good damage. You then have Flashbangs, which are mostly used for really hard pushing or to waste trophy systems. That tends to be their main purpose. And EMPs kind of fit in with this, with the exception of they're really good at breaking trench barbed wire because it's a one-shot. So that's the current meta within the game. But the next patch is going to bring in some changes that we're going to have a look at now. And I'm going to kind of assess how much the meta might change because of them. So starting with the K30, now this gun is already in a great place, and they're deciding to reduce the reticle bloom. Now I think this is more geared toward mouse and keyboard players as a particular balance for them, as the K30 really isn't that much of a problem, I don't think. I don't quite know why it's being buffed. If anything, it would need a bit of a nerf, but it's actually in an okay place. I guess the recoil change isn't massive, you know, depending on how much they change it, but generally this weapon was in a pretty good place, so I'm not quite sure why they changed it. The Nightshade did need a buff. The Nightshade was really underwhelming and was making Vi, although she is so meta and so good utility-wise, kind of a bit lackluster. So I'm really glad that they are deciding to change this. That one extra damage to the body may help with the time to kill slightly at certain ranges, and the reduced accuracy loss per shot to the bloom is really, really good. I'm very excited that they changed that because that was the biggest problem with the weapon. So that was a really good change. The SLC is simply just a bug fix. Then we get onto the DMRs. Now, the D3DI, which is Talon's DMR, they adjusted the hipfire of it. Good. I do not think this weapon needed to be any good at hipfire. I think it should be really punishing at hipfire and used as a longer range weapon, hitting that double headshot to do massive damage. And then they adjusted the fall off damage range, which I'm not quite sure what that means because they talk about actual range changes in other weapons. So I'm not quite sure what they mean by fall off damage range. I think it is just simply the amount of range that it takes before it starts dropping off. So it's a slight range, either buff or nerf. Again, they're not very specific about it, but I don't think it's that impactful. Then they talk about the Mamba, and this one really confused me. The Mamba is in a really good spot right now. It is pretty deadly at range and is probably a bit too strong in certain circumstances, but they've decided to buff it quite heavily. One buff with the range going up by an extra 2 meters, which it really didn't need, and then the slightly reduced horizontal recoil, which again I feel like is more geared towards mouse and keyboard players because I don't think there was a recoil problem on this weapon. I think this weapon was in a really good spot. I think the recoil was fine, maybe a bit heavy, but it kind of needed to be because of how deadly this weapon is. Then we get onto the MXR, which needed, and I'm going to say this is what needed to change. Hipfire needed to be reduced, the range needed to be reduced, and the time to kill in some way needed to be reduced. Now you either change the time to kill by changing the damage so it takes one extra shot to kill somebody, or you change the fire rate of the weapon, which will always adjust the time to kill. And in the patch, what they've done is they did reduce the hipfire, which is good. They did reduce the range, again good, but they did not fix the fire rate or anything to do with the time to kill of this weapon, and I do not think it's going to have an impact because of that. They needed to change the time to kill in some way because it was outgunning SMGs in some situations. The hipfire may help change that, but it's beating ARs most of the time, which was the biggest problem, and it's just sort of still going to dominate the meta. I do not think this change is good enough to make the weapon any different and not be as dominating in the meta. So I think you'll still see MXRs, I think you'll still see the Dahlia Trench combo, and I think not a lot of the meta is going to change because of that one simple weapon. We then very quickly get onto the pistols, which starting with the Spitfire got a little bit of a range buff, a little bit of a reticle bloom buff, which is pretty good. I think this gun was a little underwhelming, although probably will still make Lancer really strong in those first pistol rounds, but it's not a massive change and not something that we really need to be looking out for too much. And then lastly, they are changing the executioner slightly, but they're only adjusting the fall off damage range, which again, we don't know specifically what that's going to do. So don't even know if it's a nerf or a buff. It really needs to be nerfed. The range probably needed a bit of a nerf. So if it's a nerf, then we're in a good spot. It's still going to be pretty strong though. I do not think most of these weapon changes have done much. If anything, they've already made some meta weapons like the K30 and the Mamba a bit stronger. I think the D3DI nerf is okay. I think the MXR nerf is not good enough to change the current meta of that sort of DMR. So I still think DMR is going to dominate the meta. I do not think SMG is going to come back into light like they are in public matches for like high level play. I think the MXR is still going to be the go-to gun and is still going to dominate. Going then onto the 2 rogue changes they're making. Firstly, we'll talk about Glitch, who is in a weird spot at the moment. He is pretty good utility-wise for the game. He just doesn't compete the SMG with the DMRs, and he dies too quickly. but they are thinking of changing this, and they are putting in a pretty good change, I think, that may bring him into a slight bit of the meta. What they're doing is they are taking away bounce back from him and replacing it with tenacity. Now, tenacity is the strongest perk right now because of how good it is, and I think that this change could help bring Glitch in some circumstances into some flex picks for the meta, particularly on Icarus. I think him getting there on attack behind the wall and hacking all the trophy systems and the barbed wire may be good, and the SMG is pretty good on that map if you stick to the close side of A. So I think he could become a little bit more meta in that regard in some very specific maps. But I don't think this change overall is going to make him really good because the MXRs are still too strong. The moment that the DMRs become nerfed to a very even level, the SMG, particularly the LMPX, will become a bit stronger, and that's when Glitch could really shine in the meta. For now though, whilst that change is really good for Glitch, I don't think it's going to be outstanding to make him a core pick within the meta right now. And then the last one is actually a nerf to Trench, removing his tenacity and replacing it with helping hands. Now, on the flat surface of this is a pretty big nerf because you're taking away the strongest perk from him. But when you think about it, and the logic behind that change is that he has the active protection units, and so he doesn't necessarily need tenacity because he shouldn't be getting grenaded out. This is really good because what it means is it kind of raises the skill cap of Trench a bit. You have to be good with your APS to make the grenades not affect you, whereas before you could be a bit lazy with the APS and still tank a shot because of tenacity. Now you can't, and I really like that change. I think that's really good. I think raising the skill cap is good. Although, is that strong enough to take him out of the meta? For average play, even then, no, because you're giving him helping hands. So now he becomes a little bit more of a supportive role, being able to revive people, and him and the Dahlia combo, being able to get those reses off in 2.5 seconds or 3 seconds now with Trench, is going to be really strong. And I think this really hasn't changed him enough to take him out of core meta. I still think Dahlia Trench are going to dominate the top end of meta. I think you'll still see Vi, particularly with the buff. I think you'll still see Dima, especially with the K30 and Mamba buff. Both of his weapons got buffed. They're going to stay core. I do not think the flex picks are going to change too much. Maybe you'll see slightly less Talon, even more. Maybe he'll fall a little bit out of meta because the D3i did get a bit of a nerf, but even then it didn't do enough to change how strong that gun is at mid to long range, which is where it was really dominating. So overall, I do not think there's been enough of a meta change to really change anything within the game. The current meta that we see now is still going to translate into the meta we'll see for the start of ranked, so you want to be picking up the rogues I have mentioned and using the weapons I have mentioned, as well as the utility that I mentioned. Okay then guys, that takes us to the end of the video. If you did enjoy, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. You can also come follow me on twitch.tv/radbargaming to see live game commentaries, guides, Q&As, tournaments and scrims. All the links you're going to need are down in the description below. But for now guys, I hope you have a fantastic day, and remember, be loyal, be brave, be relentless, and I'll catch you in the next video.